It was in Adairsville, Georgia. I was coming back during the night. I heard footsteps. They were back and to the right of me. My first thought was my friends. And I said, hey, that's a good way to get shot, guys, kind of thing. And I didn't hear nothing. I stopped, didn't hear anything. I was expecting to hear some laughing or something. I started walking again, and I heard the footsteps. So then I notice to my left, I'm looking down, and I see a red floating light down in the bottom of the valley. And it's moving kind of like a drone would, just super slow. There's no bobbing. And it was just slowly moving. And then it dawns on me, crap. I forgot about the person behind me. I turn around and I look up, and then I glance back down, and the red light's gone. So I put my back to a tree and do that old turkey hunter patience thing. And I sit there for like 15, 20 minutes. And as soon as I take my first step, it starts walking with me again.
How much deception have you picked up on?
Oh, all the time. And it was something that I started with when I don't know if you'd know this, for the first most of my career, or I guess the first half now. Jesus, I'm getting old. I focused on interviews and interrogations and was a polygrapher. And I just stopped doing polygraphs about a year and a half ago. And I did it right when I first started that interview and interrogation process. I actually had a mentor, and I belonged to the International Association of Interviewers. And the whole premise was you need a mentor, because once you start getting into that world of being able to detect deception, you start having, well, I didn't know it at the time. I understand now, but you start thinking like everybody's a liar, right? And you start getting angry, and you can't trust anybody. And honestly, the mentor is there to help reel you back in and say, focus. Remember, you have to ask this question every single time that you think you're spotting someone lying. You have to say, what is the intent? And that can help answer a lot of questions if you're open-minded. Mainly because a lot of people their intent is not to defraud. It's kind of the example I like to give is you're sitting around a dinner table with a bunch of people you don't know. Everyone's telling stories. Everyone's going to be embellishing those stories because they want to fit in. They want to be liked, right? Their intent is not to deceive you, not to pull one over on you. And then the same thing with eyewitnesses. They want to be helpful. And a lot of times what happens is when you sit them down and you start asking them the hard questions and they realize that they really didn't see much, they'll start to embellish because now they feel silly sometimes they feel silly or feel like, oh crap, what am I doing here? I really didn't see as much as I thought I should have seen, to be helpful. So they embellish a little, so it doesn't look like they're wasting someone's time or something like that. So those are all things you have to keep in mind is, what is the intent here? I can tell they're being deceptive. And at what point did the truth stop and the embellishment start? Because a lot of these people, they saw something.
Right.
But then you have the confirmation bias, all these people, they want to believe so bad and they want to have finally had that experience that they may overlook some key details, and they'll even fight you on it once you're able to prove no, they'll still fight you. But it's what you decide to do with the information, how you decide to act during the conversation. There's all kinds of things, but I almost stopped listening entirely to some podcasts just because of that. where you can hear that, oh, that's full of shit. That's crap. I don't want to hear that. That's a waste of my time. I'm trying to learn stuff and I can automatically tell you're lying. Just knock it off. And then there's the others where you go, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's interesting. Wait, crap. Now they're adding, know, but, you can't prove all that either. That's just, experience. But yeah, in general, I keep an open mind. I've had stuff happen to me in the woods. So that's kind of where a lot of this came from.
Before I butcher anything, is it Zigan or Zigan?
Zigan.
Zigan.
Yeah. That was actually real nice of you to ask.
So just to kind of get it rolling here, give as much or as little information about your professional background as you want, kind of let people know why they should be listening to you whenever it comes to this stuff.
Oh yeah, sure. So, I told you before I started off, I'm still a current law enforcement officer here in Georgia in the North Metro Atlanta area. Coming up on 22 years. And I hadn't always done crime scene and what I do now. About 9 years that, besides being on patrol, was as a persons detective. And every agency names or calls their persons detective something different. So it could be anything from robbery, homicide, sexual assaults, things like that. So I did that for a long time. And then finally a spot opened up in crime scene. And that's where I quickly found out that I should have been doing that all along. It's almost a part now. You're like, are you kidding me? You're paying me to do this? You pay me to read, research, go to classes, learn as much as I can. And it's something that I should have been doing all along, and I fully embraced it. So I got the pleasure of going to the National Forensic Academy in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Sometimes they call it the Body Farm.
Right.
Then I became a certified crime scene investigator, a certified latent fingerprint examiner. I got the pleasure of going back and acting as an adjunct instructor sometimes. But that passed right after COVID. The guy who actually taught a lot of my beginning classes in the fingerprint world, he actually took a full-time job there. So I'm like, there's no reason for me to have to go back. And it was jokingly telling him, like, damn it, man, you're killing me. I was enjoying being able to do that. But so, the story continues, and then so as it progresses, my work colleague, he's working on his doctorate in bloodstain pattern analysis. And it would turn out that we both have similar interests, but focusing on two different worlds. So he's focusing on bloodstain. I'm focusing on latent fingerprints. And, but we both do crime scene reconstruction, shooting incident reconstruction, and I'm cross-trained in his field. It's just not love. He's cross-trained in mine. And lately, the past now 3 years, I've been heavily focusing on being able to understand the distortion and recognizing the context within the actual friction ridge patterns that we are collecting, like understanding the movements, what was happening while they were being deposited. Then it became a thing where I was working on that. And then I ended up, as you progress in your field and, start testifying in court, if you're good, you're good. If you're bad, people know that too, right? So our lab ended up being one of those that we're helping train local CSIs around us and giving instructions, classes, teaching as well. I act as a verifier for several agencies around us, probably about 7, and I work fingerprints for about 5 of those agencies on a full-time basis, not just my own. So I see a lot of fingerprints. I'm super, super busy. And that's what made me want to, honestly, during the distortion studies is when I became interested of, can I find some good dermal ridges inside these casts or inside some pictures of the impressions in the ground. And, could I help? If I can't be out in the field doing this, maybe I can help spread the word on how to collect evidence and, do that properly. But also, maybe I can help look at some of these things to help determine authenticity as far as friction ridges and dermal ridges and things like that.
So how did that all come about? Like, why were you specifically interested in Bigfoot and even applying your knowledge to that field?
Well, I had some interesting experiences in the woods. My brother and I were turkey hunters. I don't hunt them anymore. So the short and sweet of it is when you are looking for a turkey, you have to find out where they roost for the night, where they're going to, sleep. They go up in the trees, they roost. And the male turkey, he goes up and he roosts in a different tree. So if you're there when they go to roost, then you know their location. So that means in the morning, you can sneak back in while it's still dark and be between them. And then when the tom comes down and the hens come down and, basically you're in the way of the tom. So now you got them coming towards you. That's the whole goal. So there were several times where, you're there for them roosting. So that means it's the evening, it's getting dark. And that means you're however far away from camp you are, you got that walk back alone in the woods by yourself. Never once, out of the years that I was doing that, did I ever feel uncomfortable, think there was anything else out there until I had a couple of weird incidences, which at least I'd never attributed, and I still don't attribute it to Bigfoot, but I can't explain what they are, which opens my mind to the possibility for the other. So my sergeant and my other cop friends who were leasing this property, my sergeant in particular was really big into Bigfoot, the shows. He was already looking at Bigfoot mapping projects, BFRO, all that kind of stuff. And it became a conversation piece around the campfire, then us kind of bonding over it. And it just kind of organically grew from that point to where we're sitting around the fire having beer, watching all the Bigfoot shows, laughing at some of the silly stuff as cops, going, oh, that's a bunch of crap. Hey, that dude's lying, saying silly stuff like that while we, we have our own commentary. But that's how it kind of grew. It just kind of grew naturally to there. And then, everybody at work knows, I started getting Christmas ornaments, like Bigfoot Christmas ornaments,
yep.
Hanging on my door at Christmas time, stickers, coasters, coffee mugs, stuff people were picking up. So it hadn't been a really bad thing. For the most part, absolutely accepted, mainly because the things that I've done, like we were talking before, I'm pretty much bound to what I can and can't say, just like everyone would expect, since I'm still employed by them.
Right.
And, but I've been told that as long as I keep it professional and anything that I write, as long as it's on the same level as what I would put out professionally, then it's fine. So that's why I've been writing, I've written several forensic reports for a couple of people on some, big name casts and stuff like that, so they could see it. So that's been fun. So now I have a couple people sending me some really nice casts for me to take a look at and write. And that was really my main goal. But, besides trying to help everybody else, I was hoping I could start actually analyzing stuff, which has now started to happen. So that's pretty neat.
Have your thoughts on the subject changed any since you began this journey?
Yeah. I mean, I've gone through a roller coaster ride of, just like anybody would, I think. You run across, or you have a preconception of how people are. And unfortunately, I was one who let some of the TV personalities, lead me in a certain direction of thinking, okay, you can trust these guys. They seem professional, they seem nice, stuff like that.
Right.
Or, hey, you need to read this book. This anthropologist wrote this, this scientist wrote that about the subject. And then you read it and you realize that a lot of this is for the entertainment industry instead of furthering the research. Now, I almost stopped completely because of that, but then I ran across several people who were actually really serious in the field who kind of gave me a different direction to go on and started helping me, with casts and kind of saying, hey, stop thinking that way. Here's some stuff. I've seen some casts that were, like big time casts that I call BS on. Then I've seen some casts come across recently that, have me a little perplexed. I'm not finished with one particular one. I go ahead and say Cliff Barrickman sent me one that I'm actually a little perplexed on right now. And I'm hoping that I don't find anything that makes me say otherwise. That's always the hope.
Yeah.
But I treat each one like it's hoaxed and go from there, right? Or misidentified or, something, because honestly, I don't have what we call an exemplar, an actual Bigfoot footprint or Bigfoot cast that we know for sure we watched a Bigfoot make it. And I can say that is actually from the foot, right? We don't have anything like that. We have speculation and we have good, contextual evidence and things like that, but nothing definite.
Have you examined the Patterson track cast?
No, I have a copy of it, and it's a very, very poor copy. I don't, that's one of my things, if I hadn't, I can't speak to it, really, if I haven't actually seen it. So, I mean, I actually have it on my wall, behind my thing. I look at it all the time, and right above it, I have a bear cast, to remind me of, what a bear looks like and what this looks like. And that took me down a whole other road, because now I'm in the middle of a big bear research project. I figured I couldn't speak authoritatively and say something looks like a bear in a cast if I don't know anything about bears. Oh my God, you just kept on going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. And I'm sure you've already encountered, just that question that I just asked you about the Patterson track. I know recently on Facebook you posted some stuff about a Freeman cast.
Oh, yeah, I did.
And you're not in a great position in your line of work whenever it comes to Bigfoot to make a lot of friends.
No, and I'm probably not going to make a lot of friends in the Bigfoot world, but my goal isn't to try to make friends, and my goal isn't to try to get speaking engagements. I'm actually searching for the answer myself. So, and one of the things that we have to do, remember when I was talking about having, what we call an exemplar, like that awesome control sample, we don't have it. But unfortunately, we are using a lot of famous casts from the past as exemplars. So my first thought was, well, let me take a look at it. And luckily enough, I have some first generation copies of these things, with those minute little details in them. And I'll go ahead and tell you that, and I think we alluded to this before, it's hard to talk about intent as well. So many different things can happen when people find an impression, so if you actually found a real Bigfoot track, a lot of things, especially Cliff likes to bring this up. People like to put their hands in it and go, oh my God, look at this. And they touch it, right? Right then is not an intent to transform or manipulate that impression in any kind of way. It was just I'm not thinking, and oh my gosh, look at this, and they touch it. It's unfortunate because later it's hard to prove the intent. You can't prove what what happened, unless there was a bunch of people there. But then even so, at this point in the game, it doesn't even matter if there was a bunch of people there. No one's going to believe you. So, and then you have, and then I'm finding with my bear study that during certain times of the year, bear paw pads, when They get deposited into certain types of soils and substrates. Their dermal ridges can look like and sometimes mimic human friction ridges. So it's going to take more than like a patch of dermal ridges here and a patch there, because you got people accidentally touching the cast before it's dry enough when they're pulling it out and they're depositing it unknowingly. So there's all these things, or like I speak to, like, I'm not going to, if I find something like that, I'll never talk to say it was intentionally manipulated as a hoax, because we just don't know that. There's so many different ways that friction ridges or dermal ridges, whatever, or that pattern itself can come to be on the bottom of a cast. Because a lot of times they're not even in the substrate. They're, like I said, they're deposited while someone's pulling out a wet cast. So, it's disappointing sometimes, but because I would hate to find out that you might actually have a real Bigfoot impression that has dermal ridges in it that look to be manipulated. All right, because that would be like the worst scenario ever, because you might actually have a real impression with something that now is written off as evidence because the dermals don't fit. All right, so that could be a bad scenario as well.
You mentioned the cast from Cliff. Is there any other evidence that you've seen that you believe might be legit?
I haven't gotten my hands on a lot of those, like I call like first generation good detail copies. I've seen photos of stuff, like I've seen some photos that made me go, but that was more for like a handprint or an arm impression or something like that on some glass. The issue is again, with the technique of documenting it, these things are coming in, I see them, and as soon as I blow it up to look at the ridges or look at the details, it becomes pixelated.
Right.
And and that's a huge problem. And I think that's going to be a huge problem until we start thinking differently about collecting evidence. Because I've been seeing a lot of, like a lot of these expeditions, they're following what some people have told them is the right way. And I guess, and you know what, we've been told this at our own lab too, that we're overkill. That we have such high expectations for things that we should, but we're not going to tone it down. We're always going to be, it should always be to a higher standard. Because honestly, if we come across a piece of evidence that may actually be a Bigfoot, we're talking about an undiscovered species, and it's not being treated as such, it should be, almost to the level of, you find evidence, it should be treated like a homicide. You have potential DNA, you have, potential, friction ridges. There's so many different things that we should be going after, instead of just immediately casting it and then holding up the cast as the cast is the proof. And I think that's a problem. It's almost like collecting souvenirs instead of evidence. That just honestly needs to change, as far as the people who are interested in actually using science to investigate things. I get it. Not everybody's into that, or that's not even their goal. And I totally understand that too. But I think for the people who say that that is their goal, then some things need to change, because it hasn't been working for the last, 50, 60 years, right? I mean,
right.
So something needs to change.
Let's talk about that. Where are the researchers screwing up at? And are they getting any of it right?
Yeah. So the main thing is, well, the right thing is they're going out, right? They're actually going out and looking, and they're doing, I know a lot of them, they're doing their best. They're trying experiments with food, all different kinds of things. And I think the biggest part of the problem is the documentation. And quite honestly, I understand why. When I first went to crime scene, you've seen all these shows, all these movies, all this cool equipment. I'm going to learn how to do this. So then I go to a crime scene, I do all that cool stuff, and then I spend 2 freaking days doing reports and documenting everything, right? That is boring. It's boring. So now we're at the point for like Bigfoot that something as simple as just being told how to take the picture correctly. So we belong to a cold case task force, and one of the things that we immediately noticed is in the beginning when we first started is we wanted to judge. We wanted to say, oh my God, like, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And then after doing it for a while, you start to get into the mindset of the time period, what they had, what they were thinking at the time, not really their fault. That's the way things were done then. And then that opened our mind up to, well, what could we do differently? So we now investigate any homicide or, death investigation as it's a homicide. But if we know for sure it's a homicide, we're going to investigate this and we're going to take it and document it to a certain level that's beyond what we think is needed at the time. And that's in case the case goes cold, because we never know, if the case goes cold, technology changes, methods change, the way we think changes. And some investigator 10 years from now will be looking back and saying the same dang thing that I was saying about the people from the 80s, right? They'll be going, well, why didn't you do this? And I'm like, hey, I took the whole house. Yeah. It's all right here, documented. Go forth and prosper. And that's why that was one of the reasons why I started looking at the older casts. But the basics are, when you're photographing, handprint, fingerprint, footprint in the ground, the most basic thing is, there's two main things really, but that picture has to be parallel. The camera has to be parallel to the ground. It's just that simple. If you have the camera angled in any kind of direction, it'll distort size. And that's just how it is. You can make things look larger than what they are. And I've shown somebody this, when we were talking about Bigfoot, I took a picture, of my own shoe impression, angled the camera just so, and said, check out this huge print. And right there, when I said huge, I introduced a little bias to them. Yeah. All right. And then they saw the photo and they're like, oh my God, yeah, that is big. And then I showed them the next photo and I was like, actually, it looks like this. And it's the parallel picture of like my size 12 foot. And I'm like, it doesn't look so big anymore, does it? And they're like, no. I'm like, that's the problem. Taking pictures at angles distorts things. And I totally get it. People are holding their cameras to the sides and stuff because the sunlight, there's lighting issues and things like that. And they just haven't been shown how to take the picture properly. But if you want somebody like me or, another science person to look at this evidence and actually be able to give an opinion on something, then it has to be done correctly. So, even when I'm documenting things, I'm documenting it in a way for another expert that's not within my field that may see something that I don't. Just like the Bigfoot field investigator, when they're taking pictures of their impressions on the ground or on the glass, should be taking pictures in a way for someone else who knows more to be looking at it. So, it's a full circle kind of thing, because you never know what another expert may see if it's documented correctly. And then the other thing is not just close-up pictures of that print, but of the entire area. And, people say, why? I'm like, it puts it into context, right? Where you found the foot. And again, another expert like a biologist might be like, oh, I see certain trees over here. They might have been there for that food. Or I see a path they're heading, in which direction, that makes sense. There's a water source right here. As you document like a 360-degree thing. And then like in crime scene where we might see a car or a person within that 360-degree photograph thing that we did, we might see, another suspect or a vehicle that may have been involved. And just like in Bigfootery, we may see a tree branch or a tree structure or something that you didn't notice before that now you have evidence, because you never know what's going to be valuable later. It's kind of like when we take 1 billion photos inside a crime scene, and then, the case detective's looking at it and they're like, oh, holy crap, look at this receipt on this desk. We didn't think that they had been to a car wash, or we didn't think a car wash, had anything to do with it, but then later it comes into play and we find out we have a picture of it. The same thing can, hold true in this. It's technically an investigation. Just two little things, context and parallel pictures. That would be a great help.
Documentation. Document
It always comes down to documentation.
Yeah.
You should see my form I have listed. It comes down to what's the weather like 7 days before, what's the weather like 7 days after, what's the altitude nearest food source. And if I'm interviewing somebody, are you into Bigfoot? Were you here looking for Bigfoot? And now I'm asking for, are there any biasing questions?
Right.
Stuff like that. Have you been here before? Is this your first time here? Kind of stuff. There's a lot of questions that I have. I think I have I made for some people, when I first started Crime Scene, we had a checklist, until we got used to doing things. It was like a 6-page, checklist basically of, don't forget to get this, don't forget to get ambient temperature, axillary temperature of the person that's deceased in front of you, temperature outside, what's the humidity like, any insect activity, if so, who, what, when, and it just goes on and on and on. And so I made some forms like that so you heard a sound, so you found something you want to collect for DNA, so you found a footprint, a fingerprint. So I got like all these forms for now, answer all these questions.
That actually takes us right into a question I wanted to ask you. If you were put in the position of a Bigfoot researcher who has been contacted by a witness and they say, hey, I came out of my house and over there at the tree line was a Bigfoot standing there looking at me, and it turned around and walked off into the woods. How would you personally go about conducting that witness investigation?
First, it would be a sit-down interview, like in a room. And I understand we're not law enforcement here. So ideally, you don't want that interview like in their own home. Sometimes you can't help it. They don't need to feel, it doesn't matter. There needs to be an interview process, especially by someone who's conducted interviews before. And mainly, I think the problem I see with the interviews being conducted now are the leading questions. Like when a person's telling a story and they pause, then they start giving them examples of what they could say.
Right.
Like when you say, "What did it look like?" and they're like, and then you go, "Was it brown, black?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, it was black."
Yeah.
I'm like, what? No. You hold that pause and you let them finally speak. You don't offer suggestions. I think that's one of the biggest things that I see, happening. But I would hold the interview, and then I would have them show me where the place is, and then I would, depending what I found, we have to judge these things of what evidence do I have in front of me. If I go over there and it's just, a bunch of pine needles and there's nothing, I might say, let's take a walk. Let's go see if we can find anything that's disturbed. Because I'm going to go look right then. I don't know what I'll be looking for, but I'm used to looking for human activity. Just from being in Crime Scene. So any type of disturbances, anything really. But then during that interview is going to cover a lot. So I totally realize, and from experience, that eyewitness interviews aren't usually the most reliable, but that's pretty much all we have to go on now with this kind of thing. So it's really difficult to discern what's really happening, what's not really, or what's really happened, what hasn't happened. Now, if there was actually something there, like a footprint.
Sure. Let's say there's a track. How would you go about documenting that track?
Okay, well, now that has now just become a half-day thing for me, probably, for that one track, because now I'm worried that I might miss something for it possibly being an undiscovered, whatever. And now I'm like panicking, going, "Oh my God! All right, let's stop, breathe, let's do this right," and start going through my actual checklist. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check the weather. That's something I think people forget to do. I'm going to check the weather, and I'm going to find out, is anything bad coming that's going to make me not be able to deal with this print right now, because or keep me, So I want to go and check and see if I can find anything else. Because now, if I have something, I need to know if I need to expand my scene or if this is it. So now it's time to let me check, and I don't need a bunch of people. I need to do it on my own. And to give you an example, I can go to a homicide here, and me and another crime scene guy are going to be the only one in the house, and no one else is allowed in until we tell them they can. And it's really that simple. And once we have figured out what's going on, we will have created a path or created an avenue, and we will like hand walk you through the scene. The detective who needs to see it, we will walk them through and show them stuff and tell them where they can and can't step and things like that. And I know it sounds like overkill for Bigfoot, but if we're looking for DNA, we're looking for any dermal ridges, we have a footprint, we have something, who knows, maybe there's hair. We don't know any of that until we start checking the entire area, because you can always close it and make it smaller. But once you start contaminating the area around it, it's kind of hard to start again. You've already contaminated that area. Yeah. So interestingly enough, I have found a makeshift solution for some rain to protect a footprint. And it sounds silly, but you've seen on TV where they have like those little metal frames that we use for putting around a footprint so we can cast it.
Yeah.
So we put that around it, and it acts like a dam. Well, I found on Amazon, it's an umbrella you wear on your head. So it's like
I know what you're talking about.
It's like 3 feet long. Well, it turns out that part that goes on your head doesn't touch the ground when it's open.
Okay.
So I legit will put the frame around it and then open that umbrella that fits in my backpack and open it and put it over top if it's going to rain. And I don't have time to deal with it. Like, I found it. Oh my gosh, it's starting to rain.
Yeah.
Frame, umbrella, done. Unless it's going to be a monsoon, right? If it's just lightly raining and it may pass, then you might just have to photograph and deal with what you can. But, once you get that casting material in, 15, 20 minutes goes by, it doesn't really matter if it starts to rain or not. It's already starting to set and cure. But honestly, if I found that footprint, I check the weather, and that would help me determine what I need to do now. So let's say I expand out and I don't find anything, and I come back to my footprint. Now I'm going to don my mask so I don't breathe any DNA into the sucker. And I'm going to get down, and I'm actually going to look inside this thing with a flashlight with oblique lighting. Oblique lighting is lighting from the side. And I'm going to check to see if I have any dermal ridges or any kind of marks or anything inside, details that I know I need to keep. If it's possible, I'm going to take a sample from inside that without disturbing any of the details. Like, I'm going to find the worst possible spot, and that's the spot I'm going to sample. But I'm also going to photograph or film me doing it and show where it came from. Like this whole process of, a little arrow, my little sticker arrows pointing to the spot with a label that says like S1 for sample 1. I take the sample. And that way, what it is, right? And then photograph it, all that stuff. And then, before and after, so you can see where the mark came from. So then when it's cast, that divot is not a detail that's actually anything to do with the cast or the footprint. As you can tell, this could be a very lengthy process of doing that. That overall picture that people take, and then they're done. Back in the day, that was a great idea. But now pretty much all the footwear examiners and even fingerprint examiners were working from photographs now. So at the foot level, I would actually divide that up into several overlapping sections, and I would actually get closer than just one photograph of the entire foot. And I would come in and I would be photographing the interior of that as well at a more macro level. Now, using oblique lighting for, to light up the details, if you're doing that, you're also going to have to do the oblique lighting like a 300, from all different angles going around that impression. Because if you're casting shadows, those shadows can also cover other details. So it's kind of like it's a long, lengthy process. You're going to end up with, maybe 100 photos just documenting that foot impression. And you should be occasionally checking, like blowing it up on your screen just to make sure they're in focus and the lighting is right and you're getting good photos. Because, you only get one chance. So then, you can move into casting and all that kind of stuff, once you've done all those things. That's pretty much what I would do.
And is somebody's camera phone good enough for this?
No, we've done entire scenes on our camera phones. You've seen those megapixels on these camera phones now. I mean, the camera on our phones now, they are amazing. The only thing that you need to realize when you're taking pictures with your phone is that when you pinch zoom, that's not a true zoom. You're just enlarging the pixels.
Right.
So if you're going to take pictures of something of small details, then you need to be moving your phone closer and not zooming with your phone. Because as soon as you try to enlarge that on your computer, it just goes to straight pixels and you can't see anything. So you should stay away from zooming anything on your phone when you're documenting things, and always just move further and farther away with your phone. That's what you should be doing.
I know that you've interviewed a few people on your own podcast / YouTube channel, some witnesses. We've spoken before about this. I asked you earlier about how much deception have you noticed? What about the other side of the spectrum? I know by now you've talked to people that are telling you the truth. How do you process that? I mean, they're not lying, so what's going on?
All right. Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent question. And, it's easier to process what you think is a lie. There's nothing more to do. Right. Once you know something, when someone's lying to you, there's nothing more to do. It's a lie. It's not true. You move on. The problem with a lot of these things, and I know, even John Baranchuk in his book, he talks about it, is perception. So people can wholeheartedly believe something and be telling the truth technically, but the manner of how they processed the information while this incident was happening, it's hard to tell if that's what really happened. Like, something happened because they believe it, and they're telling the truth. Now, what actually happened versus how they perceived it happening could be something entirely different. I say this because, and he makes a very good example in his book of, let's just say a bunch of Bigfoot people go off into the woods together, and they sit in the middle of a field, and they're doing their investigation. They're all clustered right together, almost touching. You can barely see with the light they have to the edge of the field. They hear noises. They can't tell what it is. And then something comes out of those woods. They can't see what it is. It's too dark, but something comes out, and it's in the air, and it flies around and comes back, and they come back. And now, on their way out, they're all trying to discuss what happened. So groupthink is starting to happen right now, because what's going to happen is, before they're to camp, they're going to all basically collectively decide what happened. They saw something flying, and let's put this into the woo crowd and say, all right, we had an encounter with a Bigfoot. He came out. There was a portal. He flew around us. He went back into the woods. You take an entirely different group with different expectations, put them out there, and just say it's a bunch of hunters. The exact same incident happens. They're walking back, and someone says, well, how did it go? They're like, nothing. This bat came out of the woods, and it flew over us. They never actually saw the bat. They assumed it was a bat.
Right.
They just saw something moving. But for their perception, for their reality, that's what it was. It was a bat. And then you can just keep on going down the line for the different belief systems. So the problem is a lot of these things, I think, except for the, the ones in the daytime, we're like, I actually saw the big hairy thing. It was walking right in front of me. All right, if you determine that person is being truthful, that's something entirely different. But, those ones where I saw something in the woods, not sure what it was, but I'm fairly certain I had a Bigfoot encounter, at night with glowing eyes, things like that. That can be problematic, but when you hear them and they're telling and you're like, well, they're telling the truth. They saw something. But for me, I don't know what that could be, but all I'm saying is, there's different perceptions. People process information differently. I don't really know what else to say about that.
No, I understand what you're saying. You can go to a point of, this person is telling me the truth that they saw something, but for you personally, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was a Bigfoot that they saw, just that they saw something and they believe it was a Bigfoot that they saw.
Right. I think I'll have different levels of belief based off of the situation that I'm being told. Like if it was daytime or, something like that. I got a full good look at it. It was walking right in front of me, kind of thing. Okay.
Well, the woman that you talked to that saw one up on the ridge.
That was actually what I was picturing while I was just saying that.
I mean, she's telling the truth.
I believe her. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
And I believe that she saw one. Now, what do I do with that information? I'm not entirely sure. It's one of those things where I believe them, but to wholeheartedly believe, you almost have to see something for yourself, because seeing one for yourself, I imagine, and I've thought about this, if I were to see one for myself, I imagine it would be paradigm shifting. Everything, all questions about life, all questions about everything I thought I knew, it introduces so many more questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It introduces so many more questions. So I don't think that me believing someone's telling the truth and thinking they really did see one technically or really means the same to me as if I would have seen one myself. So I'm not calling her a liar, but it feels like, I think she did see one. I do. But at the same time, I don't think it means as much to me as if I would see one myself, if that makes sense. I'm having trouble, that's a great question. And I've never really thought about, the juxtaposition between the two. Yeah, I might have to think about that one more.
You're in a very unique position. And like I said, since I found out you existed, which it's been a little while now, you are a person I've been wanting to talk to. For a very long time. I have beat my head on the wall and talked about how Bigfoot research needs to be approached as a forensic science. I don't know why people started trying to stick the scientific method. It's an entirely different situation. A Bigfoot sighting is an event that takes place. It's no different than a crime scene, and that's how it needs to be approached. I personally am of the belief that the issue at hand is we would already have some sort of proof or a much stronger argument that these things exist if researchers, including myself in that, had been doing things correctly to begin with and had taken the time to learn how to do things correctly. But that's not the case. That's not what happened. And you can't separate the wheat from the chaff. Everybody has the right to conduct things however they want to. There's no guidelines. We've kind of talked about that in posts on Facebook before. And you're in this position where you have your professional career and now you're looking into this. So what happens if you do have a Bigfoot sighting? Is that something that you would even talk about? Would you even admit that you had a sighting because of what it might mean to your own professional career? I mean, your investigations and testimony have helped implicate people and put them in prison or keep them out of prison. So what
You're
happens?
Absolutely not wrong.
What happens if you have a sighting, or what do you do with it?
I don't know. It's one of those things I think that you can think about and try to come up with what you think you will do, but until it happens, I don't know. I don't think it's the same thing as, like being on a baseball team and going, all right, what happens when I get the ball? I'm going to throw to first base. I'm throwing second. Right. I don't think it's the same thing, right? So I try to think about, and I have thought about this, but you know what? I never thought about what you said about it affecting my career. Honestly, up until just now, I was only thinking about it philosophically until you just said that.
I mean, there's been police officers before, you've talked to fellow police officers that are involved in Bigfoot and have admitted to sightings and everything's fine. Nothing's happened. There was actually a police officer that was involved in a huge hoax, and we won't get into that.
Yeah. No. And I hear you. I think my biggest problem is the level that I'm testifying at now.
Yeah.
I've actually already, someone's already brought up the book one time that I did. But luckily I had a prepared answer for that. So, it didn't go as bad as they thought it was going to go. Cause unfortunately I work in a county, Fulton County, and a lot of people know that. That was in the news for a lot of time for our DA's office kind of shenanigans. But a lot of stuff happens inside our courtroom that shouldn't happen, and only in some. It wouldn't be fair to say all, but there are certain courtrooms that I'm in that it almost feels like it's a TV show. Like there's way too much leniency going out to the to either parties, honestly, to the prosecution or to the defense, and they're being allowed to make a show of it sometimes, and that's not how court's supposed to be. But I knew exactly what they were talking about when they came after when they mentioned the book. It was during a voir dire, and that's basically when you're telling all your qualifications, going through your CV, and why you would be an expert, be able to testify as an expert witness in something. So both sides have a chance to ask you questions to basically qualify you before the judge rules yes or no, you can be an expert witness.
Right.
And we had just gone through it, and I had talked about my published articles, and I left the book out. And the defense says, but you've been published other times too, right? And I was like, oh crap. And I cut him off, and I was like, yes, absolutely. I said, I wrote a book on how to cast impressions in various types of soils and substrates and stuff like that. And I geared it towards, the Bigfoot, theme, trying to make it really fun. It's pretty cool, huh? And it just kind of stopped it. And I was like, all right, there we go. And I was like, wow, that happened way too fast. But but that's what I'm always trying to tell people is people are watching, so I have to be careful about what I say. And sometimes I'm not the most artful speaker. I'll forget, I get tired, and I'm hoping I don't do something. But as far as if I had a sighting, man, I don't know. I just don't know how I would handle that, because I imagine, just like everyone else, you want to tell everybody, something exciting just happened in your life.
I mean, you have both sides. I mean, everybody's different. Everybody's an individual. I've talked to all different kinds, and some people want to tell everybody. Some people don't want to tell anyone. It's just one of those things. I think it would depend on the circumstances and everything, but I just think, yeah, again, you're in a very unique situation. There's many different ways to look at the potentialities of you having an experience out there.
Yeah, I'm not going to worry about it till it happens. If I start thinking about it and I go too deep, I'm gonna worry myself to death.
I just ran David out of the Bigfoot world. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was like, all right, y'all blame him. I'm out. He's right. I'm out.
I wanted to ask you about the body farm.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So the body farm. Yeah. For people that don't know, this is a place where they've got a bunch of dead bodies and they study them and learn forensics. There's a lot of talk about why haven't people found a body of a Bigfoot? And of course, a good excuse is, well, things disappear in the woods. You know, bodies don't last very long in the woods. And I know that we're talking about an undiscovered creature here, and it's not the same as, you know, a human body, but just for the sake of conversation. How long does it take a human body to disappear on its own in a typical forest environment in the United States?
Except that every forest is different.
Right. I mean, the acidity levels.
I'm going to hit you up. I'm going to hit you up
and,
with, yep. Temperature, moisture, acidity levels, even the microorganisms, the type of fungus that's in the area. It's all going to be different. And you're not wrong. I think one of the biggest things to consider, I worked on a project where we got to do something fun. They were blowing up pigs, right? Not live ones. They were dead.
You animal.
Right. So there was the state forensic anthropologist. She was doing a study with somebody else on how basically it was IED kind of study, right?
Okay.
The explosive devices.
Right.
They were looking at what was the blast doing, that compression when the explosion, went off. What was it doing to the bones? They were like blowing up cars, paint cans, and had like dead pigs on sticks, like there were people standing there getting blown up, and that made me go, holy crap. That was right before I went to the National Forensic Academy, and I was like, man, that's so nasty. I was like, how long does that take before it like disappears and stuff like that? Because that stuff was already smelling. It's really weird. Something as simple, and I can't remember the temperature. It's like 52 or 53 degrees or something as simple as that. A temperature level where the bottle fly doesn't fly. Right. So like at 54, 55, say I'm right on the 53, it's somewhere right there. But say at 54, 55 degrees, that fly is flying around all day long, laying eggs, got your maggots going. They're just tearing up the meat and stuff that's on the ground. And then it drops a couple degrees, they stop flying. So, that alone right there can change how long a carcass is going to lay there.
Start slowing it down.
Oh, yeah, because your insect activity has dramatically decreased, right? They play a huge role, especially, beetles, flies. It's amazing how fast they can take a carcass away. I did see a pig in a controlled experiment that was completely gone and skeletonized in like a week and a half.
Wow.
And that was with a camera on it, making sure no scavengers were coming. Because that's the other issue.
Sure.
So in a controlled environment, it was a week and a half and this pig was gone. Now you took it, and this was that study, I think it was done in Florida, but you take that same study and put it up in Maine, and where the temperature is different, it may be there much longer. I don't know. But we're also talking about scavengers. Limbs are going to disappear. We found a body. We found parts of a bone from a cold case using cadaver dogs. And basically, what happened? Well, we found the rest with cadaver dogs, stuff like that. But somebody was out collecting moss for like aquariums and stuff like that on this little stream bed, and they found some human bones. Now, it turns out that when we went out and found all that we could, they were spread out. It was almost a half a mile. It was a pretty good distance. It's much further than it normally is. So I'm guessing at some point something just picked up the bone and took it. It wasn't like disarticulated like right there, and then a whole leg was getting traveled down half a mile. That's a sight to think about. I'm sorry I'm laughing, people, but
I'm still trying to wrap my head around a half a mile. That's
it was an outlier. It was an outlier. It was just an example of how weird outlier things can happen. But none of these bones were together. They were all within a few hundred yards, but 100 yards is far.
Yeah.
So we didn't recover, but like a third, and the rest we are fairly certain. And this is what I was just bringing up. The dogs kept hitting on this sandy area of the creek. We dug, but then we realized it'd been like 4 or 5 years. Those bones are gone. They've been in that sandy, wet area. They basically just weathered and disintegrated.
They are the sand.
Yeah, they are the sand, and that's what the dogs were hitting on.
Wow.
The dogs weren't wrong. They were hitting on the bone. It's just, and the other stuff that we found was not in the creek. I think disarticulation by other scavengers, predators, that plays a major role, not just from the insect activity, but when we're talking, and the other thing, with all of that combined, you think about what a cougar does, the big predator. You don't usually just find them laying around.
Right.
They're just like a dog or a cat that's out in the wild. When they start to pass away, they go find a nice quiet place where they're not going to be bothered. So that's a consideration. Like a lot of bears, they crawl back into a den and pass away. And you don't readily find those. I think the other issue you might have is we don't technically know the intelligence level. And, even elephants are burying their dead, right? So if there's any indication, and all signs point to, if this creature does exist, it's a lot more intelligent than some are giving it credit for. And I wouldn't put it past, their own burials. So that would be problematic, right?
Yeah.
I don't
sure.
see
Definitely problematic.
Yeah, I think, when we talk about the missing bones issue is at what intelligence level are we giving this creature to be able to say we should have been able to find it if it has passed away? We should have been able to find bones by now. And people wrongly look to like skeletons of missing hikers, other anthropological sites, like of, skeletons found in caves and things like that. The ones found in caves on the anthropological scale, they're usually by accident. We weren't there looking for bones, right? It's almost unfair to attribute to automatically, whenever we say missing bones, usually that argument is with people who are immediately thinking of, well, it's just something as, not as smart as a chimpanzee.
Right.
It's just a missing gorilla or, something like that. We're always using gorillas and apes and things like that as a comparison, which really isn't fair, because if it does exist, we know nothing about this thing. You just don't. So you can't just, it's like picking and choosing your evidence for your argument when there isn't any.
Well, like the missing hiker, analogy.
We're actually looking for them.
Right. With a huge amount of people, we know the area that they're in or, are supposed to be in. The hiker isn't trying to hide. They're trying to be found usually,
yes.
Whenever they succumb to whatever. Caves are usually burial sites, and that cave is pretty protected from the elements and everything. There's usually more than one body there. So again, typically whenever people talk about, skeletal remains in caves or whatever, a lot of those times those caves are being archaeologically explored, and excavated, and that's how the bones are found.
Right. And that's exactly what I was saying. It's almost like picking and choosing the scenario to fit the narrative without just, being open-minded and going, there's so many different variables that come into play on why we haven't found any bones. It could be as simple as they bury their dead. Done deal. It's over.
Yeah.
Right. And then you'll never, or you just, look into most of the areas that they would crawl up if they weren't as intelligent as I'm giving them credit for, which I think they'd have to be, honestly. But or they would have been seen a lot more and found a lot easier. But I think it's just there's just too many variables. It sounds like a good book. To explain it all. A chapter for each variable.
I don't know if you were dodging it. And if you don't want to talk about it, probably. That's fine. The turkey hunt. You experience something whenever you're turkey hunting, but I don't recall you saying what you actually experienced that you can't explain.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you. That's no problem. I've told other people. I did skip right over it. I was trying to make a point on something else, but I wasn't intentionally trying to dodge it.
All right.
Yeah. So, it was in Adairsville, Georgia. And unfortunately the place has since been taken back over by the paper company and leveled. We were leasing a 363 acre lot, and we'd go out hunting and stuff out there. And I was coming back during the night, and what I was doing is, you've seen those valleys that they're not so deep that you can't see the bottom. You can actually see the bottom. It's like one of those spots where people put deer stands on and they watch the valley, and you can watch the other side. So it's not that big. But I was walking on the game trail, and the trail itself was about a quarter of the way down from the ridge. And as I'm walking back, I hear what sounds like footsteps. I heard footsteps. They were back and to the right of me, and they were up on the ridge. I couldn't see anything. It's dark. My first thought was my friends. And I said, hey, that's a good way to get shot, guys, kind of thing. And I didn't hear nothing. I stopped, didn't hear anything. I was expecting to hear some laughing or something. I started walking again, and I heard the footsteps. So now my mind has gone to, there had been a person up there that was messing with our trail cameras. And we know it was a person because I set up a trail camera on my trail camera.
As everyone should do, by the way. Jeez. Sorry.
Right? No.
Huge pet peeve of mine.
Right. So you have your main trail that you're watching for deer and other animals, and that's just out in the open. Right, because the deer don't care. And then I had hidden off to the side the camera facing that camera, and it caught somebody. Basically, what they were doing is they were deleting my pictures on the SD card as they passed by.
Oh wow! Okay.
And trying to, but yeah, because at first we couldn't figure it out. I was like, dude, my cameras have been out here forever, and I keep getting nothing, but I keep finding tracks. Something's wrong with my cameras.
Yeah, there is.
So I was like, damn it. But it was our little spot. No one we had never seen any evidence of anybody out there. So there's this guy walking around the woods with a flashlight, and he's deleting our stuff. So I'm thinking it's that guy up there. And all I have is I carry this little red flashlight that I hook on the strap on my backpack, and when I click it, it just lights up my foot area and a little ways in front of me, and that's it. And I'd gotten so comfortable, with those walks back that I didn't really have any more lighting other than that. I was like, I don't need anything else. It's just me walking back. Now, I did have my pistol, but that was it. And so it continues. I stop. It continues. And I'm like, man, son of a bitch. I'm like, why is something messing with me? So then I notice to my left, I'm looking down into the valley because I'm looking, I'm scanning around. I feel uncomfortable and paranoid. And I see a red floating light down in the bottom of the valley. And it's moving kind of like a drone would, just super slow, not moving. I mean, it's moving, but not like, there's no bobbing. When I first thought it was a cigarette, like someone was holding a cigarette, like the cherry of a cigarette, because that's how small it looked, but it was more red. And it was just slowly moving. And so I'm like dumbfounded staring at this thing going, I don't know what, I have no clue. And then it dawns on me, crap. I forgot about the person behind me because I'm staring at this red thing.
Yeah.
So I turn around and I look up, and then I glance back down, and the red light's gone. So I put my back to a tree and do that old turkey hunter patience thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I sit there for like 15, 20 minutes going, okay, well, I know you can't see me, and your patience is pretty good for a normal person. Usually they would have started walking by now.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, I'm out. So I turn and I start to walk. And as soon as I take my first step, it starts walking with me again.
Huh.
And I was like, no. So I'm walking, I'm yelling stuff, trying to act all like manly, you know, I got a gun.
I'm not scared.
Yeah. I was like, you better knock it off, you know, like talking crap. And finally I get to, and the whole time I'm concerned and clueless, because not clueless, I'm confused because I don't understand why, you know, like, I keep thinking like if something was going to attack me or this person was going to do something, they would have done it by now. Like, what are they waiting for? And I finally get to the edge, down towards the bottom of that finger, that ridge that I'm coming on, that I was on. And I can see the glow in the trees from the fire from camp. And I did something really dumb because I thought, well, you know, I just want to be back in camp. I can see the fire. I know this thing has had any chance possible to take me out. I know it's not a bear. I know it's not a deer. There is a person right there, and they hadn't shot me yet. So bye. And I took off.
Coming in hot.
Yep. And that's what I was yelling. I'm like, coming in. And they're like, why are you yelling coming in? We're not at war. You know?
I am.
But my brain went to, you know, when we were doing like those high risk warrants and stuff, when we come into, you know, another room or go into a different area where I'm like, blue, you know, saying who I am. And I was like, coming in, camp, coming in. And they're like, what? Shut up. Making fun of me. But yeah, so I had that. And then about a year later, around that same camp, my brother brought his son, who was 10 at the time, to go camping for the very first time. Thought it would be, you know, super easy, safe. You know, there's no one else around. It's our spot. We're leasing it. And we're sitting around the campfire, and all of a sudden he says, Uncle David, what's that? And he points past me, and I look off into the trees, and it's that freaking red light again.
Wow.
And it's moving. My brother drew his weapon. He's a cop too, by the way. And he drew his weapon, and I started laughing. He's like, what, do you think this is funny? What is that? Why do you think it's funny? And I said, well, you can go try to find it if you like. And I was laughing because I felt relief. It wasn't really laughing thinking it was funny. At the moment, it was more of a, oh, thank God I didn't imagine it. My brother is seeing it too. Yeah. And his son is seeing it. And it's the same thing. So I told him, I said, mark it. Did you mark it? And for us, I don't know how other agencies do it, but when we both worked in the Albany, Georgia area, and we would say things like that to like when we're training somebody or someone else is in the car, you know, and we tell them to mark it. So what they would do is, I don't know if you've ever been driving at night and you think you saw something, and then you try to drive up to it, and now you're not sure if you're in the right spot or not.
Yeah.
Right. So when we tell them to mark it, they pick a landmark, and they keep their eye on that landmark so we can focus on driving. And then when we get there, you know, he says, stop. It's right here. Then we know for sure it's right there. So I told him to mark it, and he says, I got it. So I said, all right. So I got up and just kind of casually walked over. It's gone already. It's gone. It's just kind of floating for a while and then disappeared. And I was like, you got it? And he's like, yeah. So I walk over, I'm shining my light up, and I'm like, all right, where? Tell me where. And it was about 11, 12 feet up. So I said, all right, well, can we see the tree? And that's when I was going to say ridgeline, because I was thinking, well, maybe it was just a plane going by, you know, and we could see the sky right there. But it turns out the ridge was much, much higher. That hill was much, much higher in the background. So it was down below and closer than we thought, actually, because it was so small. Our perception of it was that it was further away.
Yeah.
But it was actually a lot closer than we originally thought. So that meant that that thing was actually pretty tiny. But it was just a red, not like a fire engine red, more like a maroonish red. And it was just kind of just moving really slow. And then my friend, the last one I'll tell you, my sergeant friend of mine, he called me late, well, not late one night, it was just in the evening. He was up there camping by himself. He was doing some scouting and putting out corn and stuff for deer. And he called me to tell me that he just wanted to be on the phone for a little while because basically something just yelled across camp.
Oh, okay.
He said it was so loud he could feel it in his chest. And I said, well, dude, what are you doing still there? He's like, I just need to be on the phone for a minute. I said, where's your truck? He goes, and this is so like him too, and it's so true. I said, where's your truck? And he goes, oh, it's right over there. I'm like, how far is there, man? And he's like, it's right there. I'm like, so it's close by. And he's like, yeah. I said, go get in the truck. And he goes, well, there's blind spots in the truck. And I was like, oh my God, he's not wrong. You know, it's not wrong. He's like, oh, I'll be good. I'm just going to hang by the fire for a minute and just talk to you for a second. So I started asking him more questions. He's like, I don't know. It was on the edge of the field that comes into our camp, which is only about, 75 yards away. And he said that it was such a low, I don't know. He said it was like a man, but wasn't like a man. And it was really deep, and you could feel it resonating in his chest area. And he was a little startled by it. And then about a year later, they tore the trees down. And so, yeah. So with those kinds of things, and I'm not going to get into any paranormal stuff, but so when I look at those things and those experiences, I don't know what those things were. I don't know what was really happening, but who am I to say that this other thing that people say they're seeing didn't, I can't say that they didn't see it. So my mind is open for that. Plus I've seen I'm hoping I have, some stuff on my desk right now that I don't end up finding out something differently about. But I really hope. I want to know the answer. That's basically where I'm at. Yeah. I want to know. And I know other people right now, or when they're listening to this, they're going to be like, well, I know. I'm like, well, that's good for you. But I need to know. And I would like to definitively go, hey, check out what I have, like forensically, even DNA. I think DNA is going to, one or two things are going to do it for me, and or three, and I don't want the third one to happen. I don't want anyone killing it. Obviously, that would be proof. If I can get me an extra large footprint, like a size 15, 16 with ridges going all the way across that are uninterrupted, then that will mean something to me. But I really think in the end, it's going to be DNA that does it.
How can people find you and get a hold of you?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty easy. People can find me by going to pretty much anything that says Bigfoot Forensics online. I have a YouTube channel called Bigfoot Forensics, TikTok, Facebook, you name it. Bigfoot Forensics website that says Bigfoot Forensics. You can email me if you want to at evidence@bigfootforensics.com, or you can just directly message me on Facebook. I'll respond to pretty much anywhere. And plus, my name's David Zigan. That's the one I've pretty much been going by. I started Bigfoot Forensics on the Facebook group and was like, in the beginning, I was a little nervous about people knowing, what I was doing. But then I pretty much have started going back over to just using my name. And don't forget to check out the book called Casting Bigfoot Evidence, what I alluded to earlier. That's on Amazon. It's basically a small little guide on how to take those pictures properly. I have like a whole chapter about how to document it right, and then a chapter designated to like each type of soil and substrate. So you want to know how to collect the cast in mud or in wet sand or dry sand. There's a chapter on that in there.
The right way.
The right way. The way that I would have taught. I originally did this book. It was almost done before I did this Bigfoot stuff, and it was designed for the CSI world because it was something I wished I would have had. But then I thought it would be cool and pretty much change all the wording around to Bigfoot evidence, to Bigfoot. And to be honest with you, I thought more people were going to be interested in it. I would have done a lot better in the CSI world. I would be truthful with you, more because I actually had a lot of CSI people reach out and like, get the book, and I know it's at in Glencoe, Georgia, being used as a helpful little guide for some of their baby CSIs. So that's nice, but they're like hiding it because it says Bigfoot on it. So that's kind of funny.
I mean, hey, it's a nice approach.
Hey, I tried.
Well, thanks for taking the time to talk to me and entertain me. And
oh, absolutely, anytime.
Yeah, man, for sure. We're gonna have to hook up again in the future.
Thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.